In this video, we're going to learn how to analyze the grading feedback provided by SIMNet when we submit a project so that we can improve our final score by utilizing our multiple available attempts. Let's get started. Here I am in our SIMNet grading screen, and as you can see, continuing from the previous video, there were 20 grading elements on this particular project, and I got 18 of them correct for a score of 90. And I want to see if I can improve my final result by analyzing the grading feedback and seeing if I can correct the remaining issues. It's important to understand the various areas on the grading screen so that you can put those pieces together in order to correct your problems and improve your score. The first area to be aware of is here on the right. Looks like it's a picture of the Microsoft Word project. But there's a very clear notice here at the top that you need to be aware of. It says, notice the image below is not the file you submitted. This is a representation of the solution file. So what you're looking at here on the right is not your Microsoft Word file. It's a picture of what the completed successful project should look like. And what you'll do is you'll use this picture to compare against your file to see if you can spot any of the issues visually and compare them and correct them. So as you can see, as I scroll down, this is what the completed project should look like, and there are also some red and green lights. These red and green lights correspond to the numbered steps in the project cookbook. A green light indicates that you got that step correct, and a red light indicates that there's a problem. So it looks like in this particular picture, I have a problem that I have from step 3E in the cookbook, and then I have a problem from step 6B in the cookbook. So that's the first thing to be aware of, the picture of what should be the completed file. The second piece is to compare that against your file. So at that point, you open up your file and see if you can spot any of the issues visually. You could also arrange your windows side by side to see if you can spot them that way. But the idea here is that you're comparing your file against the completed solution file, what it should look like here on the SIMNet grading screen. So those are the first two elements. The third element is here on the left side of the grading screen, and it's the verbal descriptive information about each of the error messages. And what you do here is you take a look and see that you have a problem associated with step 3 in the cookbook, and here's one associated with step 6. And if we click on each of these little arrows in the corner, you'll get an expansion of that description, and you can see which of the sub-steps you got correct and which ones still have a problem. As you can see here in step 3, I have green lights on steps 3B, 3C, and 3D, but step 3E still has the problem. Notice that it corresponds to the red light for 3E here on the picture of the solution file. And it's telling us that I have a problem with the font and font size. And if I scroll down further, I can see the detailed feedback. It says that several paragraphs do not have the expected font size. It's saying paragraph starting with this text does not have 11 points, and then this text, and then finally this other text. None of these paragraphs have the 11-point font that is expected. And we'll get into some more detail on that here in just a few moments. Then looking further, the problem on step 6, once again, I'll click the little arrow next to step 6 and scroll down, and let's look for some more detail. Looks like I have step 6C correct. It's got a green light, but I have a problem here with step 6B. That instruction indicates that I was supposed to type best regards and press enter 4 times, and the feedback says that it can't find best regards. Document does not have the text best regards at the beginning of a paragraph. So those are the problem descriptions that I need to see if I can correct. Now, sometimes the grading feedback is very straightforward, and it's not hard to figure out what to correct. This feedback here on step 6B is pretty straightforward. It says that I'm missing the text "best regards." If I take a look at what the solution file should look like and I scroll down, there's "best regards," and it's telling me that I have a problem on step 6B that it's missing. So from here, I go back to my document and I compare it against that area. And when I scroll down, sure enough, I can see that I've forgotten to include "best regards" before Emma Cavalli's name. Here, I'll turn off show hide and you can see it more clearly. So it looks like I accidentally forgot to do that step. The last paragraph of the document shows up, and then here's Emma's name. But when I go back to what the solution should look like, here's the last paragraph, there's Emma's name, and sure enough, I forgot to include "best regards" and enter 4 times, just like the instructions said I should have done. That one's pretty straightforward. The other one is a little bit more tricky. It's telling us that there are 3 different paragraphs that don't have the expected 11-point font. And it's important when you're reading this feedback to try and think like the computer would think. Remember, this is automated grading, which means that the grading is only as good as what it's been programmed to look for. So in the case of validating step 3E, the SIMNet program has been programmed to look for paragraphs that start with certain text, and then once it finds those paragraphs, see if it has the expected font. So the instruction said change the font and font size to Calibri and 11 points. But if you think back to when you did the project, you don't remember looking for particular paragraphs. So what's going on? Well, at this point, it's worth it to go back to the original cookbook and see what the instructions said. So if we scroll up to the top of our grading screen and click on the word Chapter 1 Project, it will bring us back to the original cookbook. And if we scroll down to step 3E, let's see what's going on. It looks like on step 3, we needed to apply these formatting changes to the entire document. And we went through steps A, B, C, D, and E, and it looks like we made a mistake on step 3E. But there was no instruction that said to look for particular paragraphs with particular text. So that could be a little bit confusing. But now that you've gone back and looked at the original instruction, now you can come back to the SIMNet grading screen. So we'll scroll back up and we'll go to previous attempts, and then we'll click on that first attempt that we made. And when we expand step 3, now it makes a little bit more sense. Going back to step 3E's feedback, apparently the computer, the program, is looking for certain paragraphs to have that 11-point font, and it's not finding the expected font. This is what the solution should look like. Let's look at our document. Let's start by looking for a paragraph that starts with "I noticed today that you're." And if we go back to our document, there it is. The first paragraph, "I noticed today that you're." And the feedback is telling us it doesn't have the 11-point font. So if we highlight that paragraph, sure enough, the font size is still set to 12. We forgot to change it to 11. Now let's go back to the feedback and look for a paragraph that says "the service and experience I can." Going back to our document, there it is, "the service and experience I can." This is the paragraph that it's looking for. And once again, it only has the 12-point font. We never changed it to 11. And then finally, this last paragraph, "gaining your trust." There it is, "gaining your trust," and this is the paragraph. And once again, when we look at the font size, it's set to 12. So SIMNet's grading has been programmed to look at the individual paragraphs. But the original instruction wanted us to change the whole document. So once again, if I go back to the original instruction, it had me applying the following changes to the entire document. So to understand what the feedback is trying to tell us, it's evaluating each paragraph, but to fix it, all we need to do is highlight the entire document and then make sure that our font size is set to 11, which is what we would have done if we had done the step correctly the first time. So that's how you work a problem where the answer is not necessarily straightforward. You sort of train yourself to think like the computerized grading. What would it be programmed to look for in order to validate that you followed the step? Once we've corrected that problem, and then of course we were missing best regards from step 6. Let's go back to previous attempts and look at our attempt again. And step 6B, the document does not have best regards. So we'll correct that. We'll include best regards. And then we'll come back to our grading screen, and that looks like all the problems that we had. So we'll come back and we'll save our document. And now we're ready to submit it again. So now we're going to use our second attempt. And what we'll do is we'll scroll back up to the top of the grading screen. We'll click on Word Chapter 1 Project to return to the cookbook screen. And now we're ready to upload our file for our second attempt. So I'll click Upload My File, and it will present me with the File Explorer screen. I'll make sure that I'm in my Downloads folder or whichever folder you've saved your files. I'll make sure that my modified file has the correct date and time stamp, that it's the most recent date and time. We don't want to waste an attempt by selecting the wrong version of the file. So here it is, and we'll select that and upload it and submit it. And sure enough, I've corrected both of the problems, and now I have 20 out of the 20 grading elements correct, and I received my 100 on my project. So I was able to correct this in just 2 attempts. But it's important to remember that you actually get 3 attempts at each project. Let's take a look at that. If I go back to my previous attempts, you can see right here that I have used 2 of my available 3 attempts. So this means that if I had not corrected all of my problems on my second attempt, I still have 1 more attempt available where I can go back into the grading screen, I can analyze the grading feedback, I can compare it against my document and see if I can correct even more of the errors and utilize that third and final attempt. As you can see, having 3 attempts is a very useful way to learn basic troubleshooting skills and also work to maximize your score on your projects. So let's review the process. First of all, understanding the elements of the grading screen. On the right side, you have your picture of what the solution file should look like. That's not your file. Then the second element is your file in Microsoft Word. And then the third element is on the left side of the screen, and that's the detailed verbal feedback. We talked about this idea where you want to try and think like the computer grading is programmed to think. Sometimes the feedback it gives you is fairly obvious. Other times when it isn't, you need to ask yourself, what would the computerized grading be looking for? And that will help you interpret the messages. And then you can go back to the cookbook, see what the original step had, compare it against what the grading feedback is, and hopefully work out what the problem is and what you need to do to resolve it. Finally, talking about using the 3 attempts, I will give you this advice on the best ways to use them. On your first attempt, you go through the cookbook in order and you do the best you can to work out all of the steps. You refer back to your sim book if you need to, and you work through the project, and that's your first attempt. Then you get to the grading feedback and you use the tips that I've provided to try and work through as many of the remaining problems as you can. What happens sometimes is sometimes you can't solve them all, and other times when you solve one problem, you may accidentally create a different problem. And that's where your third attempt comes in. Your second attempt should have improved your score, and now you go back and you try and pick off as many of the remaining problems as you can, and then use your third attempt, and you should have the best score that you can achieve on that project assignment.